In a previous video, I showed you how to assemble a set of baffles for your side pipes that you can use on your hot rod. And then even in another video, I showed you how to put together, or how I put together, a set of roadster / sprint style headers for your hot rod. Building the 29 Ford Roadster has been an interesting challenge. So let's get started, and I'll show you how I built this second set of headers for the 1929 Ford. Hi, I'm John from 1929FordHotRod.com. Using the Corvette suspension from a C4 Corvette and Corvette rims that have a huge inward offset towards the frame, the tires are just kissing the front tubes on the headers on a sharp turn. This resulted in option 2 for headers, Lakester headers. This is what one side of the Patriot H8001 header kit looks like. I laid out the pipes on the floor somewhat to the way I would see it on the engine. This gives me an idea of how I need to cut and shape some of the tubes. Before I got too carried away with the build of the headers, I decided to take a pattern of the tapered tube. I'm thinking later on of replacing these headers with a set of stainless steel ones that I will self-fabricate. What I'm thinking of is taking a piece of 3.5-inch stainless steel tubing, cutting it along its length, and placing my pattern that I just copied over the tubing, cut off the excess, and reform it and re-weld it to make it look like this tube. But that's for another project for another time. I noticed that all of the primary tubes for the Lakester header kit were identical. Each of them were 16.5 inches long with an outer diameter of 1.5 inches. Each one of them were bent to 110 degrees. These pipes should be fairly easy to replicate using stainless steel tubing, but again, a project for another time. To get started with the Lakester header kit, I thought I'd prop up the secondary tapered tube using a variety of wooden blocks. Using one of the primary tubes, I placed it into the port for number 2 cylinder. Here I'm trying to determine the correct position and angle of both the primary tube for number 2 cylinder and the secondary tapered tube. This first primary tube fits nicely into the small tapered end of the secondary tube without any cutting at this point. I measured the outside radius of this tube just for reference purposes. Standing back and looking at it from the side and also from the front of the car, I decided that I would move the tapered tube in a little wee bit further. Here again, I made another measurement on the outside radius of the tube and found it to be about 9 inches. The main purpose of making these measurements is to replicate the exhaust system on the other side of the engine. Many fabricators, when they build their Lakester headers, just drill a 1.5-inch hole for the primary tube into the tapered tube. Here I wanted to have a little more shape coming into the tapered tube, so this is how I decided to cut the primary tube. I must say, doing it this way does create a little more difficulty assembling the headers, as there will be a lot more cutting, shaping, and fitting to get this to fit properly before I can even weld. After a bit of fiddling, I managed to get the last 3 primary tubes in place. I decided that the middle 2 primary tubes would be dealt with as a singular item, so I welded them together. This is where some time and patience come into play. Using a Sharpie, I traced the pattern of the middle 2 tubes onto the tapered secondary tube. Using the air cutoff saw and die grinder, I cut well within the outline of the Sharpie. Making a mistake here could be outright disastrous, or result in a lot of unnecessary welding time filling up spaces and holes that just simply didn't need to be there. Using a Sharpie, I drew on a couple registration marks onto the pipes. This will provide me with a quick visual while I'm spot welding to make sure I don't lose my alignment. A great deal of care needs to be taken while welding this tubing. You do not want to burn a hole through and then spend time fixing the burn-throughs. Now I'll trace the hole for the 4th tube and spot weld it in place. Now it's time to clean up all of the welds. Here I used a variety of grinding and shaping tools to perform this task. So far things are moving along well. There are several options in dealing with the output of this header. One option would be to insert a baffle into the tapered tube. This would be fine for some hot rodders, but I don't want to be breathing exhaust gases or fumes while I'm driving the car. Another option would be to close off the output with a 3.5-inch flange and install a second output facing downwards using a 2.5-inch pipe that would run underneath the frame and between the frame rails to the back of the car. Having built a set of side pipes with my first set of headers, I thought I'd continue with this idea for the Lakester headers. So that's the route I will go. So now comes my next big challenge, figuring out how I'm going to get the side pipes to attach to this Lakester header. To help me along with the idea of getting the side pipes to attach to the Lakester headers, I first played around with some ABS pipe that I had laying around from a recent renovation job. During this renovation job, I used some 45-degree fittings to get around a variety of obstacles. So I thought, why not use this idea on the hot rod? So at my local supplier, I was able to find these 90-degree elbows that I used to create my own 45-degree fittings. Using the ABS pipe fittings and a few pieces of ABS pipe, I was able to come up with a bit of a plan. So now it was time to implement it on the hot rod. To make the assembly process easier and add more strength to the welded joints, I decided to cut some scrap 3.5-inch tubing into 1-inch rings. I then cut a small section out of the circumference of each ring so that when compressed would fit snugly inside the 3.5-inch tubing. I then fitted these 1-inch sleeves into each of the tubing pieces and tack welded them in place. Using these sleeves will make my assembly process and mock-up a whole lot easier to figure out the exact position of all my pipes. Here the first piece of the 45-degree tubing is attached to the output of the Lakester header and is staying nicely in place. This 45-degree piece of tubing has two sleeves in it, one short one and one longer one. The longer one will go towards the side pipes. This is the same section as in the previous slide. The only difference is I've added a short section of 3.5-inch straight tubing. Now things are starting to shape up. I finally managed to connect the output of the Lakester header to the input of the side pipe that's running along the frame underneath the body. These are the exhaust baffles that I previously built and explained how to build in another video. So now it's time to slide them into the side pipes. So let's explain how these baffles are going to work. The majority of the exhaust gases are going to flow through the inner part of the 2.5-inch tubing. A portion of the exhaust gas will flow in between the outside part of the 2.5-inch tubing and the inside part of the 3.5-inch tubing. This gas will then hit the donut ring and have to reverse. This reverse flow will meet up with the forward flow, causing a sound cancellation. Overall, this produced a fairly quiet exhaust on the hot rod at idle and medium RPM engine speeds in the shop. The true test will be under torque conditions and higher RPM levels once I get the hot rod out on the road. At that time, I will do another video and I will also record sound levels for various conditions while driving the hot rod. I have achieved the look that I was aiming for. I have the side pipes parallel to the bottom edge of the body and are tucked closely up to the frame so that when we get out of the hot rod, we won't be burning our legs. I do intend to put heat shields on the side pipes as an additional safety measure. Now I just have to finish welding all of the tubing, make a hanger for the rear of the side pipe, and paint them with some high heat paint for now. The list of things that I need to do to finish this hot rod is getting shorter, and I'm starting to see an end in sight. Feedback and comments are always welcome. Thanks for watching. Please visit my website at 1929fordhotrod.com.